thing that we could possibly be working on. I think everybody sees a lot of news and everything else, articles coming out around AI. And what I'm going to talk about today with what we're doing here at Nlyte is really something that we're calling operational AI. So data centers are very operational environments. We're going to talk about how we are operationalizing AI to make data centers better. And I'll talk a lot about kind of what we have today and then the platform approach we're building. So without that, any further ado, let me just jump into it. First things first, I'd like to start with just a couple of data points. So first, and this is from an Uptime Institute survey that was recently done with data center operators. This was a basic question, right, around what are the benefits of AI integration in data center operations? And I'm sure it's no surprise that increased facility efficiency comes in at a overwhelming majority of the respondents saying that's their key driver, right? So at 89% facility efficiency. And then if you look, some of the other key drivers, and again, I don't think these are huge surprises, but it's always interesting to see data, lower risk of human error, and increased staff productivity. So, you can see the other items that were here, but in general, I think this is a really good leading indicator or a good driver for us to say, well, what is it that Nlyte operational AI would need to do and achieve? The other is what is the primary hosting location for AI inference workloads? And again, this is among the respondents, on-prem and colo dominating, right? 80% of the total respondents are saying they are running their workloads, their AI workloads, either in their own premises or in co-location facilities. This is going to be important as we talk through what we're doing with operational AI, what we're doing with agent, and so on. So I want to make sure that you guys are kind of grasping these numbers and seeing them. So as we look at operational AI, and what does it need to do, right? It needs to solve real data center challenges. And we know our challenges, you guys work in this environment every day. And so you know that it would be best to enable natural language queries to get the kind of instant answers that you need from the Nlyte data set, which is vast. It's not always easy to navigate through large data sets to find exactly what you need. And so this is the type of information and the way you want to be able to query that is via natural language. But you also need to be able to automate data analysis and detect anomalies in real time and predict failures before they happen and things like that. So there's a huge, I would say, wealth or a very broad spectrum of what we can do with operational AI and Nlyte to serve our customers' needs and address real problems that you have on a daily basis. So just looking a bit at the sort of overall operational AI that we have in Nlyte, I want to talk, and you see this kind of arc here, right? From left to right of things that are components of this system. So on the lower left hand, this is GitHub Copilot. I'm going to talk about each of these in more detail as we go through it. But effectively, you've got this GitHub Copilot. This is smart API navigation, and I'll get more into depth on this and what this really means, but effectively helping developers do work in and around the Nlyte system in a much more expeditious fashion. You also have the placement and optimization. So intelligent placement. This is something that already exists in the product today as well, and has been there for some time. So the ability to let the system actually determine the optimal location for your workloads, for placement of assets, things of that nature, right? At the top of the screen, looking at Nlyte Insight, this is our predictive component, and we have had this for quite some time as well. So you really think about this one more as machine learning, and again, we'll get into further details. And then as we get to the right side of the screen, these are the things that we're working on active development today that you will see coming up in early next year. And the first is our Nlyte Copilot offering. So this is using a Copilot agent to be able to interact with your Nlyte data set. And then further along, talking about Nlyte MCP servers or model context protocol servers. And I will talk more about that as well. But effectively, this is the secure interaction with external tools. So being able to have multiple systems of data like Nlyte alongside other systems that you have in your data center with an orchestration agent that is listening to and able to query data and call it together from multiple data sources or multiple servers. A little bit deeper around the intelligent placement. So when this is our placement and optimization with AI that we talked about on the prior screen, but this is where Nlyte, sorry, I've got an echo there. Okay, this is where the system is able to evaluate across considering many different constraints, right? Many different filters, if you will, the best and optimal place to place assets in the data center. So this is something that, again, we've had, many of you probably use this today, and we're very excited about the capabilities that this provides. It's available now. In terms of the GitHub Copilot I mentioned, this is really augmenting the journey for developers. So if you have developers who are doing any kind of application work in and around Nlyte, they know how to write code, but they don't necessarily have domain expertise within the Nlyte domain. This is where you can leverage GitHub Copilot AI to interact directly with the metadata in the Nlyte application, which is fantastic. So if you're looking at something like, I need to create a screen that gives me a particular view, I need to know what the permissions are for cabinets, for particular cabinets in this space. I need to explain the relationship between chassis and cabinets. Then this will allow you to ask those questions in natural language and call through the metadata within Nlyte to get your answers. This greatly expedites the journey because, without that domain knowledge, you could spend a lot of time looking through documents and so on to try and find what are the proper calls to make, what's the proper lexicon to use. And Copilot, in this case, in GitHub, is going to just give you the answers to that very rapidly. So again, this is available now. We released this just a couple of releases ago, and we already are having a lot of our technical audience, the people that are consistently in leveraging the APIs, leveraging the metadata, are really finding a lot of value in this. Then we have our predictive optimization. So Nlyte Insight is something we released a while ago, and it really achieves two things. You're looking at predictive, so you think about the ability to, say, forecast when will this cabinet run out of power based on its current usage and trends, right? When will I see a failure on a particular cooling unit based on the anomalies that I'm seeing? And then the other side of that is the anomaly detection. So as you see anomalies being detected on a particular piece of equipment, even down to as granular as a particular data point, you can start to then understand where you're going to see potential failures coming in the future, which is excellent. But even more importantly, let's say you're using this to modify your thresholds, right? So you're getting a lot of alarms, for instance, on a particular piece of equipment, but they are more or less nuisance alarms. So they're going in and out of an alarm every minute or so. All of our customers say that gives us a lot of operational noise. We have a hard time then determining what we need to pay attention to and what we don't. So you want to have some kind of logic applied to that automatically so that that you can then go and say, we need to change the thresholds on this infrastructure so that we're not getting an alarm every single time this thing blips in and out of alarm within a minute, for instance. It's usually a great guideline, 1 minute, right? So again, this is something that is also available today. And then I'm going to go into the future, and really the rest of the presentation will be very much focused around what we're doing with Copilot. So in other words, leveraging a Copilot agent to query make queries, natural language queries within Nlyte, but then also be able to get recommendations for next steps. And I'll be able to talk through and show you all of this and what we're building. But here we're getting into sort of a new world, right? And I don't want you to think that, oh, this is just reporting or anything like that. And in fact, what I think it does is obviate some of the historical reporting capabilities that our users would go through. In other words, they sit down to craft a report. They have to enter in all sorts of different selection criteria and filters ahead of time. And at the end of it, you get a report. After that report runs, you may say, oh, I actually didn't get the data I wanted. I need something else. And that can be a laborious and time-taking task. And so what we're looking at here with this agent, at least in part, obviates that, right? You're able to just have a very quick and natural language conversation with the Nlyte data set. Again, if you've used Copilot, and many of our customers have, most of our customers have access to it, it's very limited in scope in a lot of enterprises so far to things like, how do I search through my email, or how do I search through my Teams? And that's great. It's very useful, right? But it isn't operational in nature. And in other words, when you are leveraging that data, whatever the feedback is, it doesn't necessarily do anything for you or do a job. And so I think that's the exciting part about what we're building here with what we're doing with Nlyte and Copilot. But first, let me talk about the personas that we're addressing. And this is just a small subset. There are lots of things I love about this discussion and about what we're doing with Copilot. None of them more than the expansion of the audience for Nlyte and Nlyte's capabilities today. And let me talk a little bit more about that. Sure, everyone on the phone understands the data center manager, the facilities engineer, and so on, right? But I'll call out two of these personas here with the asterisk next to them, and those are the compliance or audit officer as well as the finance person. So let's say it's your CFO. So historically, and I'm sure even, let's not even call it history, it's probably present day for most of you, you'll get questions periodically from someone in auditing or someone in finance saying, how much have you spent on Dell servers in the last 3 months? Or how much did we spend with Lenovo last year for data center assets? That sort of thing, right? And those are things that you are then going in and querying Nlyte and leveraging all the data set to get that information and compile it and put it back to them. In this case, when you think about it, you're giving the Copilot agent availability to these users. So now the CFO really wants to know, can bring up that Nlyte agent and start asking natural language queries about the cost of particular assets or depreciation, all of this for capital planning. So you're very much expanding the audience of natural or normal Nlyte users who don't log into the Nlyte application every day, but it is simple enough for them to leverage Copilot to ask a question of the data set. So this is a really great, as I said, a great expansion of the audience to a whole new set of users. Further, we have a set of targeted use cases. So when I say targeted use cases, what you'll see here are 10 different use cases that have a good cross-section across the personas we just addressed and talked about on the prior slide. But this is by no means an all-encompassing list of the entirety of the roadmap for AI. In truth, over the last 12 months, we've received probably between 50 and 100 different use cases already from you all, our users and our prospects who say, look, these are the things that we want to do with AI. And as I would say the market, the world in general gets more accustomed to using AI for things, the idea around the different use cases that would be beneficial is starting to really grow and expand very rapidly. So what we're doing for a release the first release that we're working on right now with Copilot is focusing on these 10 use cases. So you can see everything here from energy consumption by area to asset lookup in tickets, to one of the actual straight from one of our customers very recently is the third one there, the planned switchover, based on a real world scenario where they had a cooling outage and they needed to know how long until my storage cabinets start to fail, because storage is notoriously more susceptible to overheating than, servers and other infrastructure that has better cooling built in. And so these are great use cases that we're focusing on, and there's been a lot of work gone into developing this list, ensuring that we are capturing the right needs, the right audience, and the right personas in our output. We're going to talk a little bit about the platform for Copilot specifically, and just overall Nlyte in its operational AI and what it is we're building here. So if you think about the different components, I really like to break them down into these 4 items. So you have a Copilot agent. We're working with Microsoft, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So we're working on a Microsoft agent that would be deployable in the Microsoft Marketplace. Right? So you, as a user, you say to your folks that have managed Copilot internally, we want to get the Nlyte Copilot agent from the marketplace. They can bring that down and publish that to all of the users in your data center that have, or in your enterprise that have licenses for Copilot. It's the second component there is the Nlyte Open API. This is not OpenAI. It is an open API. It is a standards-based open API. And in fact, this is the intelligence that Nlyte is building, right? This is the conduit between the Copilot agent in the cloud and your Nlyte data that primarily lives on-prem. And it's extremely important here to talk about this, because this is the IP, right, from Nlyte. This is the piece that we are building that says, how do I take queries from an agent and make those rational queries that can be computed and responded to from the Nlyte data set. So this is the core component for us. You've got the Copilot agent living in your Microsoft instance. You've got the Nlyte Open API that lives on your Nlyte system, and then that enables all the communication. As I mentioned, even further out in the future, a little bit later next year, we're also working on MCP servers. So MCP server for Nlyte would look like an MCP server sits on the network. It declares itself to any agent that is listening on the network. That's an orchestration agent that you might be using, and that would say, the Nlyte MCP server is here. It sits alongside MCP servers from various and sundry other applications, and all of that data can be consumed and orchestrated in a way by an orchestration agent. And so this is very much, think about it as Copilot can leverage an MCP server, but other agents that you may use would also leverage an MCP server. So it's kind of an extension of what we're doing with that Nlyte Open API. And then the last piece is the tooling part. And I've already talked about the GitHub Copilot. If you think further beyond that, what other kind of tooling could we use? You're talking about things like data export, visualization, and dashboards. So what is the overall status of my AI infrastructure? What are my GPU clusters looking like? You need to be able to see the health of these systems. There's considerable investment that you all are making into those systems, and you need to be able to sort of track and analyze that at a moment's notice. And so we are really looking at the tooling of that as well. Lots to talk through here, and as always, we're happy to do follow-ups with each of you, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the overall platform and what that looks like. So I mentioned we're working with Microsoft. You can see here a joint team of Nlyte and Microsoft folks at the Microsoft Innovation Hub, where we are jointly working on it. Why is Microsoft so interested in working with Nlyte? As I mentioned earlier, there is a wide sweeping statement I would make, and it's not in every case, but with Copilot in general, what you're seeing in early days are people using it for things like Teams and Outlook, right? So you're leveraging Copilot there. You're leveraging Copilot to help with presentations in PowerPoint, Word, all of your Office suite. But it's when you think about operational AI, Microsoft is extremely invested in working with us because they understand the value in what data centers are trying to do with AI. In other words, there's a vast amount of data in Nlyte. You look at the jobs and the tasks that individual users have to do every day within Nlyte or within the data center itself and using Nlyte to help that work. And it's all operational in nature. It's everything from, what tasks do I have to perform today to, again, how much have I spent over the last year on servers from Dell? So you have these sorts of questions, this operational information. And then even further, if you look down the road, right, where's the upper limit on what AI can do? AI could be used to automatically fill in forms within workflows, things of that nature that would make it extremely useful and even rolling toward autonomous action, right? So I think that when you think about it, there's an enormous amount of value in all of that, and Microsoft understands that value, and they are very keen partners with us in this. So if I look at the broad solution around what we're going to be offering early next year from the agent perspective, you'll have the agent in the Microsoft Marketplace, as I mentioned. You'll have an Nlyte license component that gets you that intelligence, right? The conduit between the agent itself and the Nlyte data set. And then you have the data center tailored architecture, of course. What does this mean? If you remember on the second slide I showed, it clearly stated that most data centers are still running workloads on-prem or in colos, right, where they have that dedicated space in a colo facility. So by and large, our customers say, look, we have very sensitive data sets. We don't let anything go off-prem, and we need this to be safe, and we need to know that. So another key area of partnership with Microsoft is, great, if the agent lives in the cloud and the Nlyte data set lives on-prem, we don't want the data set from Nlyte going up to train the large language models, right? We do not want that. We cannot have that. And so that is what I mean by data center tailored architecture. We are ensuring, right, the security of that Nlyte data set. That Nlyte data set stays where it is. It does not go off-prem, but it does gain all the benefits of large language model in terms of next steps and best practices. And I can talk a little bit more about that as well. So imagine you ask, well, I've got some examples on this later, but imagine you ask, show me all of the servers owned by a particular business group in a particular data hall. That's great. You get that. That comes from Nlyte. Nlyte through the agent is able to respond to your query. But then the language model knows to make suggestions about next steps. In other words, would you like me to include purchase price associated with that? That's a great idea. Would you like to export this data? That's also a great idea. So it's not you or the user having to figure out what is the next step for this. It's the Copilot agent prompting you along the way. This is brilliant, right? Because now you're getting the best of both worlds. You've got a secure Nlyte data set, but you've also got all the benefits of what that language model knows to do with the type of data you're getting responded with. All of this, as I mentioned, we are focused on in early Q1 next year. And just a different view, looking at the overall roadmap for anyone who likes a different visual presentation. Just to call out that GitHub Copilot for developers is already available today. The first iteration of any kind of agent that we'll be releasing next year is with the Microsoft Copilot agent, leveraging that open API I mentioned, and again, targeted for Q1. I've also talked about the extension to MCP servers, which is going to give us all of that capability that I mentioned. It also gives you a really nice, secure way to keep your data secured, but also interactive with other systems or other agents. And then, as I mentioned, managing AI infrastructure is a key component of all of this. It's not AI per se, but AI, the infrastructure. In other words, how do I secure and track and maintain the health of the considerable investment I've made in GPUs and CPUs for AI? And that goes way up the chain, right? You're getting into liquid cooling, you're getting into CDU investment, you're dedicating entire spaces to those clusters, and all of that needs to be something that you have really good visibility into the safety and health and security of that environment. Okay, so with the few minutes that I've got left here, I wanted to just go through a few examples. These are very rudimentary, but I wanted to give you a taste of what it looks like from an agent perspective. And this is all, sort of demo view and so on. But in this case, I simply asked if I power down a particular cabinet, which groups are affected? Very useful, right? Because now I don't have to go to a spreadsheet to find out. It says, hey, in this cabinet, you've got two business groups. You've got business and Acme Corporation. And then you remember that I mentioned that you get the benefits of, sort of the next steps. And that really comes from what the large language model knows to suggest. In this case, show me the assets for Acme Corporation in this cabinet. So now it says, oh yeah, right, obviously. And then you click that and it gives you the next set, right? So now I've got my next set of data. Now I'm getting more granular detail from the data set about that business group's assets in that cabinet. And then you can see that you'll get additional prompts, and this continues to build out. This expands. If you're using Copilot today or you're using any agent today, you know that these suggestions continue to evolve as those agents and models progress, right? The more data they understand, the more they understand what to ask and how to ask it, the more important this becomes. The other side is, I mentioned that we've got lots of personas. You saw the use cases. They're not all related to just gathering data from, for instance, asset records. You also have things like real-time data. So you might ask, can you show me the cabinet power usage for a particular data hall? And in this case, absolutely you can, right? So we can get a real-time reading immediately from the data that is based on the real-time data metrics that are coming from the assets, or in this case, all of the cabinets, which would be an aggregate power in wattage there. So it's exciting to say that AI is not just limited to the static data sets. It is very much also able to handle and query the real-time data set as well. And within that, you've got just an enormous wealth of information, if you think about it, and all of that at your fingertips, leveraging Copilot. And with that, I am going to close. And I appreciate the time today. And I think I will say this, over the last several conversations we've had about this, we've presented in a recent users group and so on, just an absolute ton of interest. And so we would be thrilled to have really a few things. Any more conversations with you, deeper conversations around, questions, answers, or what am I going to be able to do with this? Please reach out to your account reps at any point to ask for more detail or other questions. I'm always happy to get that. And then the third thing I would say is, use cases. So use cases that might be specific to your environment, or they're just things that you're thinking about leveraging AI for within the data center. And we maybe have already received those. So by all means, send those over. I'm always very eager to learn more about what you might want to do with AI. But if I can just summarize a few key points here, and I'm going to take this back to an early slide here, right here. There is a lot. We've been on this operational AI journey for a while. If you look at everything on the left hand of the screen up to the middle at the top, those are all things that are available today with Nlyte. Some of these are very much geared toward developers, as we rightly call out here, and others are very much geared toward machine learning type of capabilities, predicting, forecasting, and looking for anomalies within that. But as we go further, right, toward that right side of the screen, this is where a huge investment and time investment for us is going into developing the future. And that is leveraging Copilot and ultimately developing MCP servers to enable our customers to really operationalize AI within their data centers. And with that, I will close and thank you all very much for your time and interest in the topic. And I look forward to hearing from all of you in the future. Thank
Actually,
you.
Jeremy,
Yeah, Mike.
you do have one question in the chat, actually.
Okay.
Is it an AI agent, actually? I assume you can ask anything about the cabinet, assets, power fluctuations, etc., and then when resolved, present the remediation situation. And then the follow-on to that is, can the conversation be saved per user?
Great questions. So to the first question, yes, of course, that is exactly what we're talking about, right? All of that whole scenario through the Copilot agent is, I would say, an emphatic yes. Saving a conversation per user, I would say that we are at the behest of what Copilot will offer. And so, to my knowledge, those can be saved, but certainly something that I will look further into. I like the suggestion.
That appears to be it for questions.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all for the time and the interest. And I look forward to, again, talking to as many of you as possible over the next several months about this.